You're in violation of Article 14-F.
Mireya Falls said, tapping her fingernail against the locked gate's touchscreen like it was her personal gavel. Parcel access has been suspended until visual compliance is restored. My twin daughter's formula, 2 days' worth, sat in the metal locker just behind her. Full sun, 94 degrees. The ice packs I'd pre-authorized for delivery were already sweating through the lining of the sealed bin. Mireya Falls, president of the Mariners Fold HOA board, adjusted her embroidered security vest like she was preparing for a photo op. You were warned, no outdoor bins, no non-standard coolers. This is a uniform community. I kept my voice low. That cooler's FDA certified, and your gate denial timestamp pings back to my forensic server. You've got 6 hours before the cache fails and becomes medical evidence. She blinked once. The smirk faltered, but not for long. Before we go any further, pause. If you've ever lived under an HOA that thought it outranked common sense or state law, subscribe right now. Because what you're about to see, it started with baby formula and ended with the director of CPS leading arrests off my porch. I'm not joking. Scroll if you want to pretend this doesn't happen. But if you've got kids, you'll want to watch what comes next. I'm not here to debate moisture thresholds with you, Mr. March, Mireya said sharply, tapping her clipboard. You're flagged for non-conforming visual utilities, breach of Clause D6 perimeter regulation, and unauthorized medical mitigation devices. No exceptions. I didn't look away. My name's Colbin March. I spent 9 years on the DOJ's Child Welfare Exploitation Task Force. I wrote the mitigation guidelines you're mangling. I held up my HOA-issued key fob. And this used to be enough to keep my daughters alive. She glanced at it. Used to be. Let me explain why I'm standing here, why I'm not shouting, why I'm not climbing the gate. That cooler, the one baking behind her clipboard, contains my daughter's only source of nutrition that week. Maya and Kess were born 7 weeks early. Their digestive systems can't process heat-flushed formula. The powdered backups, useless without the custom hydration solution our pediatrician orders weekly. It was scheduled, delivered, and denied entry because of a new visual compliance initiative Mireya introduced after the hurricane grant proposal passed. They said it was about curb appeal. Disaster ready doesn't mean disaster looking, Mireya wrote in the board notes. But I've read every clause of that proposal. It never gave them the right to block parcel access to medically required deliveries, especially not to flag dependents. I should know. I helped write the ADA child exemption language back when I was still working full-time. Before the twins came, before Kendra's blood pressure dropped so low during her C-section, I thought I was going to lose her right there in that hospital corridor. You know what's funny? I moved us to Mariners Fold because of the emergency-ready claim. Mireya advertised it like a haven. Gated solar backup, smart locks, thermal sensors on parcels. Seemed perfect for preemies. But then came the smart compliance lockdowns, the neighborhood-wide beautification push, and the parcel station restrictions. And when I installed a small utility cooler outside the gate, not visible from the road, but compliant with temperature control recommendations, it triggered her wrath. That bin was the reason we made it through the last blackout, and now it was the reason she was punishing us. Mireya finally stepped back, gesturing toward the HOA truck parked nearby. You have until noon to remove the device. After that, our contractor will haul it. You'll be fined daily. I didn't answer. I scanned the digital panel. Locked. The bin was sealed. I could already feel the temperature of that milk rising, of my daughter's next feed slipping away in a shallow aluminum grave. Inside, I heard Kendra's footsteps shuffle to the nursery again. She was exhausted. Pumping had failed for the 3rd time that week. Her post-op fever came back last night. I hadn't told her yet the formula hadn't made it through, but I'd seen enough. I took one last look at Mireya's smug face, memorized the angle of the HOA truck camera, and tapped the side of my phone. My server had already logged the parcel delivery attempt, temperature readouts, and time-lapse footage, but now it was recording live. This wasn't just about one cooler. This was about 2 babies, 36 hours, and a gate that would either open voluntarily or become evidence. I didn't sleep that night. The heat inside the house had become a slow, silent predator, climbing 1 degree at a time despite the fans, despite the blackout curtains I'd nailed up around the nursery. Kendra lay curled on the floor beside the bassinet, too weak to get back in bed after her last dizzy spell. Maya's cheeks were flushed and sticky. Kes wouldn't stop making that dry, gasping swallow sound every few minutes. I kept watching the cooler on my external cam feed. The parcel sat untouched behind the HOA's metal gate. The thermal readout had already turned amber. By morning, the HOA app logged my second violation. Uncleared medical unit present after notice. $500 fine added. I walked outside just as the landscaping crew buzzed past. Mireya's new Pride, drought-resistant, HOA-approved native flora, stood in precise grid rows. A sprinkler hissed dutifully on artificial soil. "Morning, Mr. March," said a voice behind the hedge. I turned. It was Margie, my next-door neighbor, 60s, kind. Always kept lemonade in a glass jug for the delivery drivers. Her eyes narrowed when she saw me glance toward the gate again. "She's still blocking your bin?" I nodded. "She did it to Daryl 2 months ago. He's diabetic. They stopped his insulin drop-offs when he left a folding cart near his door." I blinked. "She denied insulin?" Margie's voice dropped. "Called it unauthorized emergency storage. I cited the same clause. He collapsed the next week. Ambulance came through the wrong gate because she rerouted GPS access to keep trucks from damaging the pavement. Daryl's family filed a report, but it disappeared." "How?" "She's got a pipeline. Her cousin works on the city code review board, and no one wants to go up against her. They're all afraid she'll revoke their gate access or suspend their amenity privileges." Margie motioned toward her porch, where a small wireless camera was barely visible under the awning. "She's got eyes on everything. The moment someone questions her, a compliance notice shows up." I stood there for a long moment. Maya's faint wail leaked through the baby monitor in my pocket. I turned it down, jaw tight. "She nearly killed my daughter," I said flatly. Margie's hand trembled on the railing. "She thinks she's protecting the community. She talks about grants and liability exposure like she's running a corporation. She's running a control system." A man in a yellow vest walked past with a weed trimmer. Mireya's Beautification Task Force. That's what she called the rotating fleet of private vendors and college students she used to enforce aesthetics. I checked the app again. My gate status hadn't changed. Smart denial, locked, hazard flagged. Margie looked around and leaned in. "You didn't hear this from me, but back in February, her compliance lockdown affected a woman in Unit 17A. Lost a therapy dog delivery because the crate had a red tag, wrong color." My stomach turned. And the board held an emergency vote. Without quorum, they passed something called Amendment 14F, gave Mireya power to override the HOA's parcel system for anything deemed a visual or functional disruption. We never got to review it. She claims the clause is temporary, says it'll expire once the disaster grant finalizes. It was starting to take shape, slowly, sickeningly. A system built for emergency preparedness had been warped into something else, a permissions maze only she controlled. And that meant this wasn't just about me. It was about every resident she'd silenced. As Margie poured lemonade into 2 small glasses, she hesitated. "You know about systems, right? You were in law enforcement? Child welfare enforcement. DOJ. I mapped institutional abuse patterns, flagged statistical blind spots." Her eyebrows lifted. "So, you understand how people like Mireya operate?" I nodded once. Then I looked back at the camera feed on my phone. The parcel was still there, edges darkened with condensation. A full day had passed, another 6 hours, and that milk would spoil for good. Margie touched my wrist. "If there's anything I can do..." I didn't answer right away, but in my head, something shifted. Not rage, not revenge, a line. A legal threshold crossed, and once it was crossed, I wouldn't need to fight her with threats or warnings. I'd dismantle her world using the one thing she forgot I still had. The next day, I went to the community center. I didn't announce myself, didn't check in on the tablet kiosk or flash my badge. Just walked in through the east breezeway, past the empty gym and the display wall where Mireya had mounted framed copies of past grant applications like war medals. She wasn't in her office. But Aldwin Cale was. He stood behind the reception desk, typing something slowly into the HOA terminal. His face was paler than usual, drawn, tired, maybe even thinner than when I'd last seen him at the last open board meeting months ago. Mr. March, he said, not looking up. I can't process appeal requests without formal board authorization. I'm not here for an appeal. He finally met my eyes. His gaze flicked to the security camera above us, then back down to the screen. I stepped closer. I'm not recording. That wasn't true. My belt mic had been on since I crossed the gate line, but I wasn't going to use it, not yet. I just need 30 seconds of truth, I said. He paused. One hand hovered above the keyboard. I saw the parcel bin, I said. Still untouched. We're at hour 32. Aldwin swallowed hard. I know. You approved it? His eyes dropped to the desk. Mireya doesn't call for full votes anymore, not unless someone challenges the clause. Clause 14F? A pause. She uses it whenever a parcel or exterior device violates visual standards, he said quietly. Once the item is flagged in the system, she has authority to deny access, tag it for disposal, or reroute the delivery. Without notice? She calls it provisional executive override. That's not in the original incorporation packet. He hesitated. She passed an emergency motion during the January storm audit. Only 3 board members were present. And you were one of them. I didn't think she'd use it this way, he said. She told us it was temporary, for the grant inspections only, to reduce outdoor clutter, get us classified as a disaster-ready community for FEMA sponsorship. I leaned forward. You realize she's using it to restrict life-sustaining deliveries, medical, therapeutic, nutritional? He flinched, his voice lowered further. My wife, she's in hospice. HOA covers the supplement under the extended benefit pool. I can't lose that. I exhaled slowly. So you stayed quiet. Aldwin didn't answer. Behind him, the security monitor flickered. Camera feeds rotated. The pool deck, the boardroom, the outer parcel gate. One screen showed my cooler, still untouched, still baking under Florida sun. I know what this looks like, he said, voice shaking. You think I'm just another coward protecting his paycheck. I think you're standing on the edge of something, I said, and you haven't decided which side of the drop matters more yet. His hands clenched on the edge of the desk. Then, quietly, he opened a drawer, pulled out a small USB drive, and placed it face down on the counter between us. I can't give you anything officially, he said, but if you happen to find a temporary system access log, one that showed when the override was triggered and by whom, I doubt it would hold up in court, especially if it wasn't sanctioned. I didn't touch the drive, not yet. She's watching the cameras, I said. I know, he murmured, but not the microphone. We stood there for a moment, silent. Then he added, barely audible, I didn't sign up to hurt children. I nodded once, then walked away. As I exited, the heat punched me in the chest. The air smelled like chlorine and sunburnt grass. In the distance, the gate to the parcel station buzzed faintly as a new delivery was rejected. I didn't look back, because I didn't need confirmation. Aldwin Cale had just become the first crack in Mireya's armor, and if I could widen it, if I could pull the right threads, what she'd built wouldn't just fall. It would collapse under the weight of its own lies. By dawn, the milk had spoiled. I opened the cooler with gloved hands and a pit in my gut. The bottles were swollen, the insulation soaked through. The sour smell hit me like a slap. What Mireya had done wasn't theoretical anymore. This was physical, provable, and lethal if I hadn't caught it in time. Kendra was too exhausted to speak. When I told her the formula had gone bad, she didn't even blink. Just lay there on the nursery rug with Maya against her chest, rocking in silence. I fed Kes the last 2 ounces of viable formula I'd stored in the emergency fridge inside. Her tiny lips fought it. She wasn't used to the delay. Her stomach had started to cramp. I could feel it in the way her legs kept curling. I needed the new shipment, but the parcel station was still locked. I logged into the Mariners Fold HOA portal and checked the digital tag assigned to my address. Delivery access suspended. Visual compliance tier non-conforming. Flagged emergency override. Lockdown 36-star extension active. That's when I knew Mireya had escalated. She'd added 3 more days, a full 72 hours of denied access, just to make a point. The cooler was already sealed again, with yellow tape stamped with HOA branding. Unauthorized device, pending removal. I snapped photos from 3 angles, time-stamped, geotagged. I took another of the parcel station app screen on my phone. The lockout timer, the override code field grayed out. Then I emailed all of it to myself, to an external backup, and to an old contact from my days at the DOJ. But I wasn't going to wait for someone to step in. I was going to take this further. I pulled up the board's internal review panel link. I still had access from when I requested an exemption for Kendra's home care nurse months ago. Maria had granted it then. Back before I was a threat. I accessed the logs, most of them were scrubbed, but the access record showed the override to my parcel station had been triggered manually at exactly 7:14 a.m. the day before. User, falls.m. I copied the record, encrypted it. Then I checked the HOA's internal complaint process. It had been quietly disabled, redirected to a blank form that routed to a dead email alias. No digital paper trail. She hadn't just built a control system. She'd buried the exits. Later that morning, I drove to the far edge of the neighborhood, where cellular signal cut through Maria's internal repeater system. I used a VPN and logged into a federal data compliance portal, one I hadn't used since my last task force assignment. It was still active, still live. I submitted a Level 3 compliance interference alert. No formal report, just a warning ping. If the system flagged a child welfare risk in an HOA-controlled environment, it would escalate to 2 agencies. First, CPS. Second, State Code Enforcement. Both would be blind at first, but the ping would plant a seed, a warning on record, enough for me to build something on top of. Back at home, I checked on the twins. Maya had stopped fussing. That scared me more than the crying. Her eyes looked vacant, distant. Kes clung to Kendra's shirt with one fist. My wife hadn't moved in 20 minutes. I stood there for a long time, watching them breathe. Then I turned and went back to the dining table, cleared off the dishes, and started laying out every piece of evidence I had. The cooler photos, the parcel logs, the time-stamped denial from the HOA app. Aldwin's drive sat unopened next to it. I hadn't touched it yet, because when I did, when I confirmed what I already suspected, I knew there would be no going back. This wasn't a battle over code violations or neighborhood politics anymore. It was a siege, and I was done asking for relief. I opened Aldwin's drive at 3:06 p.m. Kendra was asleep on the couch, one arm draped over Maya's chest, both of them rising and falling like a tide I couldn't protect. Kes had finally passed out from exhaustion. The air was thick, still. Our central unit hadn't cycled in an hour. I plugged the drive into my offline laptop, the one I'd kept untouched by the HOA's network since the day we moved in. Mireya couldn't trace this one. Inside the root directory was a single folder. Temp log override. I clicked. 6 CSV logs, 1 encrypted packet. A thumbnail preview of a security terminal showing the Mariner's Fold override dashboard. The first log was simple. Timestamps of parcel access entries and overrides from the past month. Most homes had a steady pattern: delivery, unlock, confirmation, exit. But mine? It was blank for the last 48 hours. Instead, a red override code appeared on the denial line. Code 14F prime, executive override, user, falls, boom, no co-signers, no timestamps of board quorum, just a unilateral decision. The second log showed deleted entries. It was a snapshot Aldwin must have captured before the system overwrote older activity. It listed 2 other residents flagged for similar blocks. Unit 17A, delivery type, therapy dog, service animal, denied. Unit 4C, delivery type, medical supply, insulin, denied. Both followed by curbside disposal entries. She hadn't just done it to me. She'd made this routine. The third file cracked it wide open, a session recording from Mireya's administrator panel. Aldwin had recorded her screen, maybe to cover himself, maybe because part of him knew this day would come. The footage showed her cursor hovering over my name. Clicking flag as non-compliant. A red dialog box popped up. Override delivery access for emergency tier parcels? She clicked yes, then typed in a reason. Visual obstruction. External cooler violates aesthetic directive. My daughter's lifeline? Flagged as unsightly. I leaned back in the chair, fists clenched. It wasn't enough to know she'd done it. Now I had the proof. I clicked the encrypted file last. It asked for a passphrase. I tried Kale 2024 out of instinct. Denied. Tried override. Still nothing. Then I paused. I thought about what he'd said at the counter. I didn't sign up to hurt children. I typed hospice. The file opened. Inside was a memo draft. A resignation letter Aldwin had never sent. It detailed the abuse of Clause 14F, his objections to its misuse, and the medical consequence of previous lockdowns. He cited legal statutes, ADA violations, and the quiet cover-ups Mireya had orchestrated through her cousin on the city review board. The letter was dated 3 weeks prior, but it had never been submitted. I exhaled. It didn't matter. Now it was mine. I packaged everything, every log, screenshot, memo, and session file, and created a secure submission packet labeled Falls Override, Evidence Child Endangerment, Mariner S. Fold, Internal Ref, March Case. Then I opened my contacts folder. Elaine Tormund. She used to be my supervisor back at DOJ. Now she was director of Florida's Division of Child Welfare Emergency Services. We hadn't spoken in 3 years. I wrote a single-line email. Elaine, situation urgent. Civil system override used to block critical infant supply access under false authority. Parcel denial resulted in near medical event. See attached, March. I attached the packet, encrypted it twice, and sent it to her personal inbox. Then I called. She answered on the second ring. March, you got it? I'm reading it now. A pause. I could hear her breathing. Through her teeth. Then, how long were the deliveries blocked? 36 hours. One child's formula cache failed. The other's was rationed. My wife collapsed trying to make it stretch. I'll call in a field team. I'm invoking my old badge. I want this filed as a 6A custodial interference event. You'll have it in writing by tonight. Bring a deputy, I said. You'll need one. Elaine didn't argue. I hung up, walked to the nursery, watched Kess twitch in her sleep, mouth still slightly open from the last strained feed. Then I sat down, opened my notes, and began writing everything Mireya had done, line by line, gate by gate, because when the storm came, I wasn't just going to meet it. I was going to name every stone it dropped. By the time Elaine called back, the sky had turned the color of wet steel. A storm was building, one of those slow, quiet ones that didn't flash or rumble until it was already over your head. She didn't waste time. State alert has been triggered, she said. We're pulling in a field agent from CPS Region the 4. You'll get contact confirmation within the hour. I stayed seated on the floor of the nursery. My back against the doorframe, Maya curled up on my chest. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Her twin was asleep in Kendra's arms across the room. It had taken half a dose of expired formula and 3 wet cloths just to stabilize her enough to stop the dry hiccups. I need more than a welfare check, I said. You saw the override logs. I saw everything, Elaine replied. You're not requesting action. You're initiating it. There was a long pause. Then she added, We're listing this under custodial endangerment with technological obstruction. That was the term. Not neglect, not abuse. Endangerment. Mireya had designed a digital noose, then pulled it tight without ever touching a child. When the line disconnected, I sat in the quiet for a long time, long enough to hear the HVAC system kick in for the first time that day. Barely audible, but enough to circulate some of the suffocating heat. At 4:17 p.m., the parcel station app pinged. Notice, exterior cooler marked for contractor removal, ETA, 17 minutes. Mireya wasn't letting go. She wasn't waiting for a knock on her door or a subpoena. She was clearing evidence. I stood, gently set Maya down in the bassinet, and moved to the front door. Outside, the sky had gone slate gray. Thunder in the distance. The wind kicked dust off the curb like it knew what was coming. I walked past the edge of our walkway and waited. At exactly 4:33, the contractor arrived. Unmarked pickup. Young guy. HOA vest, earbuds in. He didn't even glance at the cooler, just lifted it like it was trash. I held up my phone. This parcel contains medical-grade formula for flag dependents. You're removing it without consent, against protocol. The man paused. I'm just following work. Orders, sir. I tapped the side of my phone, and the live recording icon blinked to life. You're now on record, I said. That's a sealed FDA-certified container. Under Florida Statute 409.145, interfering with prescribed infant nutrition may constitute neglect by proxy. If you move it, you move into a felony. He froze, then slowly, carefully, placed the cooler back on the pavement and stepped away. I need to call my supervisor. You do that. I turned, walked back inside, and locked the door. Minutes later, the HOA app logged a new violation. Interference with authorized contractor. Emergency motion pending board vote. That was Mireya's move. The last breath before the storm. I went to the dining table and laid out the packet again. Not the evidence, the escalation plan. A 3-column flowchart I'd built the year I joined the DOJ. Civil systems abuse response. 1 column for policy abuse. 1 for digital lockout. 1 for life-threatening denial. Each one led to a different agency trigger, and I had now activated all 3. The only thing left was for Elaine to arrive, with a badge, a warrant, and someone who could take that cooler and turn it into Exhibit A. That night, I didn't sleep. Neither did Mireya, because just after 8:01 p.m., as the storm finally cracked open and rain began to hammer the clay tile roofs of Mariner's Fold, the gate buzzer rang at her house. 2 vehicles outside, one marked with a sheriff's star, the other with the seal of the Florida Department of Children and Families. She hadn't just crossed the line, she'd buried it. And now the storm was going to dig it up. The rain didn't stop. It hammered the neighborhood like a warning, soaking the manicured hedges Mireya used to measure with a ruler during her Saturday patrols. Streetlights flickered under the pressure. The parcel station's red denial light glowed like a wound through the mist. I watched from the kitchen window as the sheriff's deputy stepped out of his vehicle, tall, steady, not in a rush. He wore a windbreaker instead of a patrol jacket, emblazoned with the county seal. Behind him, Elaine climbed out of the second car. She had a file folder in one hand, sealed with a red tab. That meant emergency enforcement. They didn't knock. They walked straight past the welcome arch and onto Mireya's porch. I couldn't hear her answer the door, but I could see her shape through the frosted glass. She stood stiff, lips pursed. Elaine held up her credentials. The deputy didn't speak, just turned and motioned toward the parcel station at the gate. My cooler, the same one Mireya had called non-conforming trash 2 days ago. Now it was evidence. 10 minutes passed before anything moved. Then something shifted in my periphery. Aldwin Cale was standing at my side gate, soaked through. He held a folded manila envelope to his chest like it was a confession. I opened the latch. He didn't come inside, just stood there under the overhang. "I sent it," he said. "What?" "My resignation, just now. Formal submission, time-stamped and logged." "You'll lose your wife's coverage." He nodded slowly. "She asked me what kind of man I was trying to be. I didn't have an answer." I stepped aside to let him in, but he didn't move. "I also sent the board the log backup you showed me. All of it. There's no salvaging this now. You just became the key witness." "I know." The rain fell harder. The lights across the community center flickered once, then stabilized. A few houses had their curtains drawn. Others didn't bother anymore. Everyone was watching. "She never meant for it to go this far," Aldwin said, voice low. "It started with trash bins and broken fence slats. But then the grant came in, and she started saying things like, visual stability equals insurance leverage. And you followed? I was tired and scared, and I thought if I just kept my head down." He didn't finish the sentence. I handed him a towel, which he accepted without meeting my eyes. "You'll probably be named in the report," I said. "I know. But you'll also be the reason it sticks." We stood there for a beat. Then Aldwin pulled something else from his coat pocket. A secondary key fob. One I hadn't seen before. "It's the master reset to the parcel network. You press this against the panel, hold 5 seconds. It bypasses override codes and reverts delivery status to default." I stared at it. "She never documented it," he said. "Kept it off grid. Said if the system ever glitched, she wanted personal discretion. I think she forgot people like you might still be watching." I took the fob, heavy, scratched, the rubber seal half frayed. "Thanks," I said. Aldwin turned to leave, but paused at the gate and looked back over his shoulder. "Colbin, I'm sorry." I nodded once. "You did what you could, now do the rest." He disappeared into the rain. 20 minutes later, I walked to the parcel station alone. The HOA terminal was dark. Water streamed over the panel like it was trying to scrub away the mess. I held the fob to the access slot. 5 seconds. The lock clicked. The screen flashed green. Delivery restored. I opened the compartment. Inside was a second bin. Today's emergency shipment, marked in red. Infant critical, perishable. It had been sitting for 4 hours, right there, locked behind bureaucratic vanity and a digital wall. I lifted it gently, carried it home. Inside the nursery, I placed the cooler on the table, peeled back the seal, and took out 2 fresh bottles. Both babies were awake now. They didn't cry. They just reached, small hands, eyes unfocused, trusting the world would finally provide. By sunrise, I had 3 drives labeled, encrypted, and sealed in evident sleeves. 1 for Elaine, 1 for the CPS records office, 1 for my own. Archive, in case this all got buried deeper than anyone expected. The cooler was back in our kitchen, emptied now, sanitized, but I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Its dented lid and peeling insulation still bore the mark of Mireya's denial sticker, half torn and faded. I left it on the counter like a scar that didn't heal. Kes was asleep again, belly finally full. Maya lay curled against Kendra's chest, both breathing easy. My wife's color had returned. Her lips weren't as pale. Her hands didn't shake when she adjusted the swaddle. But the damage was done, not medically, at least not yet. No, the damage Mireya had caused was deeper, colder. She'd taught a community to normalize cruelty under the banner of order. And I wasn't going to let that legacy stand. I took out the 4th drive, the one Aldwin had given me originally, and added a few final touches. High-res screen captures of the override logs, the parcel denial interface, and the cooler's internal temperature readout from the delivery company's sensor. I pulled metadata from the HOA's own violation timestamp file and matched it against the gate denial logs. Then I recorded a short video, nothing dramatic. Just a flat, clear walkthrough explaining how the override system had been used, how it violated Florida's infant welfare statutes, and how it could be replicated in other HOA communities across the state. I titled it, Digital Custody. When HOAs bypass the law. I didn't upload it, not yet. Instead, I included it in the final folder titled State Evidence, Trigger File. If anything stalled, if anyone tried to call this an unfortunate misunderstanding, that file would go live to every regulatory board I'd ever worked with, and to the media. At 9:03 a.m., Elaine texted, "Board demanded emergency meeting, community center, come quietly, they won't see it coming." I dressed quickly, slacks, neutral shirt, badge in my back pocket. As I stepped outside, the sun finally broke through the storm haze. Light fell on the sidewalks like absolution. Residents had begun to gather along the community's main path, quiet, watchful. No one spoke. I passed Margie, who gave me the smallest nod I've ever seen, but it landed like a handshake across a battlefield. At the community center, the main hall was already filled. The board sat up front, 5 members, including Mireya, who looked like she hadn't slept. Her hair was perfect, her clipboard in hand, but her expression had hardened from smug to something closer to defiance edged with panic. Elaine stood at the side with a slim case under her arm. She motioned me forward. The room hushed. "This emergency session," Mireya began, "is being held under the HOA's authority to resolve internal disruption related to compliance misinterpretation." Her voice shook slightly. She wasn't used to being questioned in public. "We have invited the affected resident, Mr. Colbin March, to provide comment, out of courtesy." I stepped forward, opened my case, and laid out the drives. "No courtesy required," I said. "Just accuracy." I turned to the crowd. Some had phones out, others crossed their arms. "My name is Colbin March. I've worked in child welfare enforcement and federal infrastructure compliance for over a decade. I moved here because this community promised safety, emergency readiness, a system I believed would support families in times of need." I held up the red-labeled envelope. What I found instead was a gatekeeping algorithm weaponized by one person, used to deny life-saving nutrition to my daughters. 36 hours of deliberate obstruction. Not a system failure, a choice. Elaine opened her case. Deputy Harwin walked through the side door. Mireya stiffened. "This board," I continued, "under the leadership of President Mireya Falls, has violated the protections guaranteed to dependent minors and their caregivers under Florida law. Clause 14F was not just misapplied, it was invented without quorum, enforced without review, and used as a screen for personal authority. Elaine stepped beside me. She opened the evidence packet. "You'll each receive your copy," she said, "but one's already been filed with the state attorney." Mireya opened her mouth, then closed it again, because behind her, the projector blinked on, and my video began to play. The video played in silence. My voice echoed through the community center as the footage rolled, a guided walkthrough of Mireya's override system, side by side with the actual parcel denial logs. I narrated each entry, pausing to highlight the timestamps, user authentication tags, and the direct connection to infant supply categories listed under Emergency Tier. Then the screen split. Left side, my cooler, sweating under the sun, the yellow HOA tape fluttering in the heat. Right side, a thermal sensor report from the delivery vendor, red zones blooming across the graph, showing where internal temperatures had passed the safety threshold. The milk inside hadn't just spoiled, it had cooked. A woman in the third row gasped. Margie sat near the back, hands clenched over her purse. Mireya's lips had flattened into a line so tight it looked carved in stone. But she didn't move, didn't interrupt. She knew what was coming next. The final slide was the HOA override interface, screen captured, watermarked, and blown up to full width. User falls.app m function override access, unit 14B, result, access denied, disposal authorized. I let the last frame linger before stepping forward and shutting off the projector. Elaine walked to the center of the room, folder in hand. She didn't raise her voice. "We've confirmed denial of emergency tier medical goods to a dependent household," she said. "We've documented obstruction of state-mandated parcel access under a non-quorum clause that carries no legal standing. The Florida Department of Children and Families has authorized preliminary removal of board authority pending further investigation." Mireya stood, calm, controlled. She smoothed her skirt and faced the crowd. "This is political theater," she said. "One resident's emotional appeal against years of structural excellence. That cooler was unauthorized. That delivery violated aesthetics protocol." Deputy Harwin moved forward slowly. "You're welcome to repeat that in front of a judge," he said. Then he held out a folded document and placed it gently on the table before her. A temporary injunction. Board authority suspended. Mireya's hand didn't shake as she reached for it, but her face cracked. Just for a second. A tremor in her jaw. A twitch behind her eyes. Not fear. Recognition. She wasn't untouchable anymore. Elaine turned to the board. "Any member wishing to step down may do so now, voluntarily." 2 members stood immediately. A third followed after a moment's hesitation. That left only Aldwin, still seated, eyes low. Mireya looked at him. She didn't speak, but her expression said enough. "You were supposed to stay quiet." He didn't flinch. "I resign," he said. Mireya didn't. Instead, she picked up the injunction, folded it carefully, and walked past the front row. She didn't look at anyone as she exited, but the sound of the rain had stopped. The storm was over. What lingered now was debris. Elaine approached me as the residents began murmuring, voices rising in waves. "You did good," she said quietly. "This doesn't fix everything," I replied. "No," she agreed. "But it stops the bleeding." Deputy Harwin joined us at the table. "We'll send someone by to collect the cooler," he said. "We're treating it as primary evidence." I nodded. "It's clean, still intact. I left the tape on." He gave me a long look. Smart. I turned back to the room. Residents had started gathering in clusters, talking in low tones. Some were angry, others were stunned. A few, like Margie, looked almost relieved. But none of them looked surprised. That was the part that stuck with me. This hadn't come out of nowhere. It had been building, silently, behind every fence notice, every denied appeal, every unreturned call. Elaine handed me a blank envelope before she left. "Keep this for the hearing," she said. "It'll move things faster." "What is it?" "Your formal standing as the reporting officer." I hesitated. "I'm not with the DOJ anymore." "No, but the system still knows your name. And right now, This community needs someone who knows how to navigate it. I took the envelope, then walked out into the morning light, unsure whether I'd just finished something or started something new. The hearing was set for Wednesday. That gave me 72 hours. 72 hours to prepare every document, every statement, every angle of the case that had started with a locked gate and nearly ended with my daughters being hospitalized. I started with the community charter. Mireya had weaponized it with vague terms like uniformity, aesthetic disruption, and non-conforming visual units, but the original draft from 10 years ago was still buried in the county record system. I requested the copy through a state archive request line and had it emailed back within an hour. Clause 14F wasn't in it. In fact, none of the executive emergency override powers Mireya had cited appeared anywhere until 6 months ago, right after the disaster readiness grant was first announced. I flagged the discrepancies and sent them to Elaine for legal packaging. Kendra helped where she could. She was still tired, but her clarity had returned. Her voice carried a soft edge now, something steelier than before. She was willing to let them go hungry, she said, sorting through printouts with me, because of a color-coded bin. She made compliance a weapon, I replied. No, she said. She made herself the weapon. The system was just the handle. That stuck with me. Outside, the HOA notice board had been wiped clean. The app no longer displayed violations or parcel lockouts. The override panel was offline. A single banner had replaced everything. Community review pending. All executive orders suspended. It was the first time in weeks that my phone hadn't buzzed with a threat. But Mireya wasn't done. At 3:42 p.m., I got a message from a restricted HOA server alias. No name, just a line of text. Your methods violate privacy protocols. Your family may be subject to counteraction under internal litigation. I forwarded it to Elaine. Her reply came 2 minutes later. Do not respond. We already know where it came from. Let her dig her own hole. That night, I walked the perimeter of Mariner's Fold. No purpose, no destination. I just needed to feel the place. This neighborhood had been sold as a utopia, solar-backed, digitally secure, family safe. And in theory, it was. The sidewalks were smooth, the landscaping flawless. The flood drainage passed every inspection. The playgrounds had rubber surfacing. The pool had 3 lifeguards on rotation. But in practice, it was a facade. Every perfection came with a condition. Every benefit had a leash. And Mireya had held that leash in both hands, coiled tighter with every silent vote. Every HOA meeting held on a Tuesday morning when most people worked. Every clause added during disaster audits. It wasn't just about my family anymore. It was about the system she built. And the fact that it could be replicated was probably already being replicated in dozens of other compliance-first communities statewide. The next morning, I drove to the Regional Family Court Annex where the administrative hearing would be held. Elaine met me in the parking lot. Crisp blouse, dark glasses, hair pulled tight. She handed me a second folder, this one stamped, with the state seal and tagged with a hearing number. They're not just reviewing the HOA, she said. They're reviewing her. Mireya. She's named personally now, not just as board president, as an individual agent of obstruction. I opened the folder. There, stapled to the front, was the official charge. Custodial interference through extrajudicial infrastructure denial. Elaine gave me a tired smile. You gave us something solid, she said. Something we can build precedent on. We walked inside together. The lobby was quiet, the air cold. A receptionist guided us to a long room with a single panel of 3 appointed reviewers. Mireya was already seated. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear. She didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge Elaine, but she saw the cooler. I'd brought it with me, cleaned, sealed, sticker still attached. I placed it on the table between us, not for effect, not for drama, but because sometimes the thing you're fighting over deserves to be seen. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the overhead lights. 3 reviewers sat behind the raised desk, one in a charcoal suit with a notepad, one in a blue blouse scanning a digital docket, and the third, an older man with a clerk's badge clipped to his collar, who just watched us both with tired, steady eyes. Mireya's attorney was already in motion. We're filing for immediate dismissal, he announced, sliding a folder across the front table. There is no precedent for charging an HOA board member with criminal endangerment for enforcing visual compliance regulations. The system is discretionary, not statutory. Elaine didn't flinch. She simply stepped forward, unzipped her case, and removed the drive labeled Mariner's Fold 14F evidence chain. She handed it to the panel's assistant and waited until it was loaded onto the review screen. Then she spoke, slow and exact. This is a live recorded access log of the parcel denial system used by President Falls. It demonstrates a targeted override placed on the address of a registered dependent household, resulting in the prolonged obstruction of infant nutritional deliveries, which were medically prescribed and logged as emergency tier. She let the words land. 36 hours of obstruction, multiple automated rejections, and an authorization input by username, not by vote. Mireya's lawyer started to object, but the woman in the blue blouse raised her hand. "Mr. Kellerman," she said, eyes on the screen, "was the cooler's design reviewed by the board as a potential safety concern?" "No formal review," he admitted, but Ms. Falls acted under the authority of the HOA's emergency beautification clause. Elaine raised her eyebrows. Beautification? Clause 14F, subsection C, allows the board to remove or block items deemed hazardous to visual continuity. The older reviewer finally spoke. His voice was rough, but steady. "So, let me understand. You blocked critical infant nutrition because the container was unattractive? It violated uniform exterior standards. And your client," he continued, "issued the override personally." The silence said everything. I didn't look at Mireya. I looked at the cooler, still taped, still marked, still the same symbol of weaponized indifference it had been 2 days ago. I stepped forward when they gave me the nod. "My name is Colbin March," I said. "I spent nearly a decade in federal child protection infrastructure review. I've been in courtrooms where children were neglected by addicts, abusers, and predators. But this is the first time I've seen it happen by spreadsheet." The room stayed still. I moved to Mariner's Fold because it advertised safety, because it had backup systems, parcel security, climate mitigating drop zones. And instead, that promise was turned against my family. The system worked fine, but it was misused, intentionally, quietly, repeatedly. I gestured to the cooler. "My wife nearly collapsed. My daughters were born premature. Their formula requires temperature control. That bin was blocked, sealed, and marked for removal. Not because of function, because of optics." Mireya's gaze didn't rise, but her jaw locked. The blue-bloused reviewer scrolled through the attached video, then turned to Elaine. "You're submitting this for agency-wide precedent?" "Yes," Elaine replied. "We believe similar HOA abuses are emerging statewide. This case would establish regulatory constraints against parcel denial for any household with dependent care exemptions." "And the resident?" the reviewer asked, nodding toward me. "I've issued him temporary agent status under the Department of Children and Families Investigative Authority. His credentials are still active in the federal system." The panel conferred in whispers. Mireya sat back in her chair, lips pressed thin, her lawyer whispering fast and low. But the tide had shifted, and everyone in the room knew it. After several minutes, the older reviewer lifted the final document. "This board finds that the override issued by Ms. Falls constituted an overreach of authority with direct impact on the health and safety of dependent minors. We are issuing an immediate injunction on all current HOA enforcement activity under her leadership. A recommendation for formal investigation will be sent to the state attorney's office." He looked up. "Ms. Falls, your access to HOA administrative systems is suspended pending review. Any further action taken may be considered obstruction." She didn't speak, just slowly, finally, stood, and walked out. No words, no clipboard, no applause, just the sound of wet shoes on tile as a gate she thought she owned finally closed behind her. I didn't go home right after the hearing. I drove instead, slowly, aimlessly, through the roads that looped around. Mariner's Fold, past the parcel station, past the pool, past the rows of perfectly matched mailboxes and the solar-synced walkway lights that now blinked like they were tired of keeping the illusion alive. When I finally turned onto my street, the sun was just beginning to slip down behind the canopy. The sky had gone soft. Kendra was on the porch, one of the twins in her arms, the other asleep in the bassinet beside her. The cooler sat between them. She'd scrubbed it, polished the metal, peeled off the HOA tape, but she hadn't thrown it away. I knew why. That bin had fed our daughters when the system refused. It had survived the heat. It had endured the tape, the denial, the threat of disposal. It had become a symbol, not of compliance, but of defiance. And now it would stay. Not as a warning, as proof. Inside, Kendra handed me the baby monitor and went to rest. I sat beside Maya's crib, eyes half closed, listening to the sound of her breath mixed with the white noise hum. Later that night, the HOA app updated. Community governance reset. Effective immediately all emergency clauses. Suspended pending state review. Board election scheduled in 30 days. No signature, no smug wording, just a clean slate. The next morning, Margie knocked on the door with a plate of orange scones. She didn't stay long, just enough to say thank you and leave a petition behind. It already had 18 signatures. By the end of the week, it had 93. A new charter was drafted, this time with safeguards, with limits, with rules that protected the vulnerable instead of punishing them for needing protection. Aldwin volunteered to help manage the transition. He didn't say much, just sat in the back of the meetings, head bowed, hands folded. No one blamed him anymore. He'd made the hard choice when it counted. As for Mireya, she didn't show up to the next board meeting. Her house went dark. A moving truck came a week later, quiet, fast, no announcements, no letters. She was gone before the sunrise. No one clapped, but no one stopped her either. A month later, I was asked to join the new oversight committee. I declined. I told them I'd be available if things ever got ugly again, but for now, I had a family to protect and a story to finish. Because this story doesn't end with a resignation, or a ruling, or a cooler on a porch. It ends with a choice made in silence, in heat, in fear. A choice to let a policy override a person, a gate over a child, a clause over common sense. That's how it started. But it didn't end that way. Because people fought back. Because truth still holds weight when you carry it with both hands. Because even the smallest acts, like keeping a cooler cold, can become a revolution when someone tries to stop them. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.